Hello. I feel like it's so funny. I was just saying now that we're here, and now that this book already happened, and that this launch has already begun, I feel like it's already over. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so I feel kind of happy. Like I feel like I'm on the train and it's just going, and release. We had a little like a under the wire launch in Marfa, and it was really great, and people came out and stuff like that. But I feel like this is the true launch, and so very grateful that you guys are here. And so I guess I want to thank MoMA and the 92nd Street Y and Bernard, and then all you guys sitting in the first row, because you're complete geniuses and friends. And then all of you in your chairs. It seems really special that you guys came here, because I feel like pathetic is just a word, but will you come? And you did. So I feel like it makes you somehow complicit in it, And so you should know that. But I think that's how we take care of each other, in this complicity. So I'm grateful, and I'm sad that Carla is not here tonight. And I think you should just know that she's the author of Undocumented Americans, which is an amazing book. So don't miss it. If you don't see her tonight, you'll read her later, I hope. My best explanation for this book is this is what I did during the pandemic, because it was sort of I had a contract with Grove to do it sometime. It was in the pipeline, but I feel like in the same way that those of us living in New York, you see people all the time, and you're like, let's have a coffee, and you're like, yes, and this was gonna happen. You're gonna have a cup of coffee with that person in New York, It was but because of the pandemic, it was time to have that cup of coffee, and that's how it began. In part because it was a writing thing, because I felt I feel like for me as a writer, part of the thing is to, be in this, kind of foggy world, and then I go out and I see people. But suddenly there was no going out and seeing people, and I just remained in that foggy world. So it was very hard to write for parts of the pandemic, but I could really choose, And so it was just kind of really fun to go, so which Kafka today, And the first person I put in the book was Simone Weil, which was really interesting, because there's an essay in the book about Simone Weil deciding, as a Jewish person, becoming Catholic, except that her thing about being Catholic was that she would not get baptized. And the reason she would not get baptized is so she would stay outside with all the other people who weren't baptized, which just seems so fantastically pathetic. So the book really began by accumulation. One note got hit, and then it wound up being very much what would be the next note. So in a way, the definition of pathetic, to my mind, is not a steady thing at all, but more cumulative. And it just kind of has been sort of feeling its way along. And I know this is live streamed too, so I just want to thank those people for being here too, and to say that we feel you. Yeah, I will read a little bit from the book too. But I think too, the other thing I want to say about the book is that there was one poet. I mean, it's so weird, because I felt like doing an anthology called Pathetic Literature. Nobody would make me feel really bad about not being in pathetic literature, But there was at least people have, but there was one poet who was very famous and successful who was just I have to be in it, And I was like, okay, and then she gave me all her own versions of pathetic. I mean, that's why I didn't put out a call for pathetic, because I thought, I don't want to know what people think pathetic means, But she gave me all the wrong poems, and I was like, no. So then I went through her work, and I just found this one poem that was, this is how you'll find the poet. It was just at some point in the poem, somebody twitched. And I thought, that's it. It's just like sensitivity, It's just, and even amoebas do that. They kind of swirl around each other and recoil and engulf, and this is that too. So it's micro and macro patheticness. But finally, I just think that the book, for me, I think is really just a long date with what I love, and what I love in reading and literature. So I'm just going to read a couple of quick takes from the intro. So I wrote the introduction and the afterword. I mean, why would I bring anybody else into my pathetic universe? Except for 106 other people. So in general, poems are pathetic and diaries are pathetic. Really, literature is pathetic. Ask anyone who doesn't care about literature. They would agree, if they bothered at all. Perhaps the only accomplishment here is I'm saying that as an insider. This book is a kind of hollow. All these pieces of the rock, meaning literature, long and short, are just what I like. The invention of pathetic literature surely is Say Shonigan's pillow book. More than 1,000 years ago, she kept her diaries, her interminable and adorable lists, her sovereignty to herself. Being discovered, she admits, kind of ruined things. Because somebody found her diary and she had been keeping this beautiful book, and suddenly it was. So in light of our different pace, I'd say that we're ready for ruin. I sort of upstaged my own paragraph. It was more beautiful than that. And so here's some of the history of the concept. Cindy Sheehan's 25-year-old son, U.S. Army Specialist Casey Sheehan, was killed in action in Iraq. And so she met several months later with other military families and Bush, who was then pretty much bombing and destroying Iraq in the name of freedom. So Cindy Sheehan wanted to talk to him again. She sat at the end of George Bush's street in Crawford, Texas, and waited. They called it Camp Casey. 1,500 people joined her. Sheehan said, if he even starts to say freedom and democracy, I'm going to say bullshit. You tell me the truth. You tell me that my son died for oil. You tell me that my son died to make your friends rich. You tell me that. You don't tell me my son died for freedom and democracy. Actually, it was very weird to read that in Texas the other day. I thought, I'm sure some of those oil people are sitting here. She also vowed not to pay her federal income tax for 2004. I mentioned Cindy Sheehan because I recall a conservative commentator called her that pathetic woman. Her sitting there, her famous act, meant that as a woman, Cindy Sheehan was taking more space than she deserved. And that aspect of pathetic is what I'm truly interested in here. The act of taking a little less or a little more. It's the essence of a political meaning. A pathetic man is chatty, effusive, sort of gay-ish in the high school sense of the word. But what does gay mean other than non-conforming? The space he is taking is a woman's. You can't take the wrong space, a woman's space, and be masculine. Because gender is a counterweight to keep everything and everybody in line. It's a military formation. It's our national poetics. We are free to be feminist here. And I remember going to Germany in the 90s on a literary tour, and we were floored by how retro and patriarchal the German literary community was. Look at us, we crowed. But contempt here, flung at any woman who dares to approach the seat of power, reveals how flammable, how violently reactive the slimy surface of our freedom and democracy is to anyone even nominally opposed to patriarchy. You can't even say patriarchy exists. You can barely say in textbooks now that slavery existed, or jails. Why are people opposed to wearing masks during a pandemic? Has the right to bear arms ever included black men? We have a language of suppression, and it keeps everyone in line, and you can't be too fat or too sick or too ambivalent or joyous or resistant or poor or hungry or loud or unstable, because outside of porn, any deviation makes us feel the weight of your body equals too heavy for democracy. So show us your type, then we will commodify you into another form of silence. Does Oprah talk or not? It took about 100 years for pathetic to mean mean. It went from pathetical to pathetic in the 19th century, and it still meant something touching or pithy, felt. But then pathetic went negative real fast. Whatever brings up feeling in here must get squashed. The word didn't do it by itself, but something closes in on us like a vice, and all unlikely approaches will get slapped down. So what you're stepping into here is a tiny monument for witnessing change, not of any one sort, but many sorts, like a sex club of thought. A bar that serves only time in different and peculiar-sized doses. When I saw how good poor Chista Kapoor was at talking about being sick, what lengths she went to, how many plateaus of suffering she endured, I was delightedly aghast. She could just go and go. It's so bold. It reminded me of what I once heard a male critic say at a party about a female artist. She's an endless woman. The room got quiet. He had named his fear. I'm going to skip a little here. Charlene, my European... Actually, I really need some water. Somebody? That might mean I've read too much. Thank you. Wow, there's nothing like it. Charlene, and this is the painter, Charlene von Heil. I said it in Marfa because she lives there, and everybody was like, oh yeah, Charlene. Charlene, my European friend, smiles at the difference between our pathetic and the one embedded in any romance language. It got ugly here. It should be our motto. You could say we invented slavery because we made it be our economy. We became modern. We made it everything, and now we don't know where to hide it. In our guns. We bail out banks, but reparations for generations of damage is just not a real thing. I know that language changes by use, mostly in the mouth of the underclass, but I wonder if a book can be a new mouth and lips to remake a word's intention on this day in a culture. If you deliberately go through the door the wrong way, many of us at once, I hear a whoosh. There's this profound redundancy, meaning we go to literature to describe states of being, of mind producing sudden and inexplicable feeling. Can a feeling go both ways? Can we hate and love? I would never argue for why anyone needs poetry, but everyone can find a poem that elaborates a model responsible to their own way of thinking, not so much for consolation as confirmation. It bestows on you a gestational feeling, like it birthed you and you feel like you did it. It's your double. What author has not had the feeling when they meet a reader and they smile at you like you are them? Yikes. It is so violating. And yet, aesthetics will not protect you. You are not alone when someone thinks they can see your mind. Reading is a collaborative act. It takes away the onceness of the world, and it gives back repeatedly. And language is the loss that repairs. So there's one little teeny historical part, and then I shall release the stage. I taught a pathetic literature seminar at UCSD. Like Jack Halberstam is here, the person who got me into that situation. At UCSD in 2006, and we read Kevin Killian and Dodie Bellamy, San Shui, and Delaney, among others. Walser, of course. We even had a pathetic conference. It was a late-night event, scantily attended. Chris Kraus came, and I screened a wretched print of Warhol's I Am Man with Valerie Solanas, and it was so dark we couldn't really see it at all. The sound was bad, too. We had a pathetic panel, and I'm sure I talked about foam. It would be my obsession for the next 10 years, because every book we read in the pathetic seminar had some leftover froth in it. Like the action in all these novels and poems exceeded their own frame. Some sludge sat right there on the water. There was spit on the corner of the boy's mouth. You know how anxious kids used to produce spittle in grade school? Every act had this extra dose of froth. Like the stories were bobbing in a vast and inexplicable solution. Like the squeaking sounds I just heard coming out of the pasta I was cooking tonight. I got closer with my phone to record it, but then the sound stopped. What the hell was that? It wasn't just pasta or literature, but something tiny, mysterious, unjustly alive. Thank you.
Greetings. My name is Edmund Berrigan, and I'm excited and honored to take part in this reading tonight. I was flipping through this book on the way over here and just sort of being amazed at the scope. First, I read Eileen's introduction, which is amazing. And then, first, there are my fellow readers tonight. You're all really far away down there, by the way. It's like, hi. But they're really great, and people I admire, my contemporaries, my peers, I hope, my friends. And then there's this amazing other kind of name that pops up in here that's like Kathy Acker, Chester Himes, Juna Barnes, people who feel like they're sort of coming from across space and the imagination, and who are also included in the context of people like Steve Carey and Rosebud Feliu-Petit, who were my babysitters back in the 80s. So that's really a great pleasure. And then, of course, the reason I am here tonight is to read this poem on page 1, which is by my mother, Alice Notley. And yeah. She wrote this in 82, I think. I was 8 years old at the time. It's one that sort of stays with you. I don't have to read from the book for this one. It's untitled. All my life, since I was 10, I've been waiting to be in this hell here with you. All I've ever wanted, and still do.
Eileen, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. And looking at the collection, I too saw many writers who I love. And I guess I thought of them as abject. So maybe the relationship between the abject and the pathetic might be something we can talk about later. So my name is Simone White. No, my name is Saidiya Hartman, and I'm happy to be here with you tonight. Okay, so I'm going to be reading Manual for General Housework. Manual of or pertaining to the hand or hands, done or performed with the hands, now especially a physical labor, an occupation, etc., as opposed to mental, theoretical, manual as distinguished from the mind and the intellectual, manual as of a weapon, tool, implement, etc., that is used or worked with the hand or hands, actually in one's hands, not merely perspective, a tool or an object within one's grasp, not speculative, not a proposal for Black female genius, the use of the body as tool or instrument, of occupation or possession, able to have in one's hands, as in possession is 3/5 of the law, as in possession makes you 3/5 of a human, as in property handled by another. Also to be possessed, to be handled as if owned, annexed, branded, invaded, ingested, not autonomous. Manual, to be wielded by another, to be wielded on a whim, to be wielded as an exercise of another's will, to be severed from one's will or motives or desire. Manual, as opposed to mental, as in not an exercise of rational faculties, as opposed to the formation of critical reflections, as opposed to contemplation of the self or the world, a method of operating or working, a function, short for manual exercise, short for manual tool. Manual as opposed to automatic, as opposed to starting or functioning by itself and for itself, as opposed to deliberation and judgment, as in the need for direction, as in the imposition of a mistress or master. Manual as pertaining to the hand or hands, the hands to be outmoded or made obsolete by the machine, of or pertaining to the mule more than the machine, worked with the hands, finished with the hands, no more than a pair of hands, hands cracked and swollen from harsh soap and ammonia, hands burnt taking the pies out of the oven, hands stiff and disfigured from wringing coal sheets and towels outside in the winter before hanging to dry on the line, hands no longer yours, contracted, owned, and directed by another like a tool or object, the hands that handle you, the hands up the dress, the hands on your ass, the hands that pull down your undergarments, the hands that pin you to the floor, the hands that pay you $2 for the day or $13 for the week. Manual as of subject to use, made a tool, handled, grasped, palmed, slapped, fondled, hugged, harassed, caressed, as of pertaining to the hand. Manual as opposed to contemplation or theory, as opposed to the use of the intellect, as opposed to looking, viewing, contemplating, as opposed to thinking, reflecting, scheming, plotting, planning, weighing, brooding. The use of the hands as opposed to a conception or mental scheme or paradigm. Manual, the concrete, the physical, the embodied, as opposed to abstract knowledge and the formulation of it, as opposed to reason. Manual as pertaining to ignorance, obtuseness, stupidity, as opposed to erudition. As related to handle, as to be handled with no regard, as to be handled like a tool or instrument, as to be handled like a slave, like a wench, like a bitch, like a whore, like a nigger. Handled as pertaining to that part of the thing which is to be grasped by the hand in using it or moving it, to be grasped by the hand or sometimes by the neck, the ass, the throat. Colloquial, to fly off the handle, to go into a rage, to fuck shit up. Figurative, that by which something is or may be taken hold of, one or two or more ways in which a thing may be taken or apprehended. To manipulate, manage, to subject to the action of hands, to touch or feel with hands, as opposed to don't touch me, as pertaining to hands up, don't shoot. To manage, conduct, direct, control, to be handled by men, to be manhandled, to be seized by men, to be used up by men, to be used by men. Handle as related to the use of the thing, to do something with the tool, as opposed to directed by will and desire, as opposed to consent, as opposed to leave me the fuck alone, to deal with, to treat as you wish, to serve, to use, to accumulate, to expend, to deplete. Manual as related to a book, etc., of the nature of a manual intended to be kept at hand for reference, a concise treatise, an abridgment, a handbook. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I am Dana Ward. I am so excited to be here. Thanks so much to Eileen and Bernard and the MoMA and the Poetry Center, the Y. I'm so excited about this book. When I was first became interested in poetry, anthologies were these extraordinary resources to hear so many different voices. And a lot of my anthologies have broken spines from all the endless reading of coming to these new voices, and this is an extraordinary, subversive and wonderful collection of writing. So I'm so excited it exists and honored and flattered to be in it. I'm going to read from a long poem that's called Some Other Deaths of Bastiaan Otter. Otter, for those of you who aren't familiar with his work, was an artist, Dutch artist working in the States in the 70s. And his last piece was called In Search of the Miraculous, and it had a few elements to it, but the most dramatic was that he was going to sail from the east coast of the U.S. Back to Amsterdam. And he did not succeed on that voyage. And so, anyway, I'll start. Then the only thing I see is light on water. It's the kind of water you could maybe drown tyrants in. This sort of baptismal of need Bastian Otter disappeared beneath, searching for miracles over the near-death experience shimmer the open sea shines on its liminal pilgrims. His grail hunt results in the dreamiest picture, nothing there but ocean, open surf, the suggestion of sea life, of leisure at its edges, work painted over in fairy tale tints, empty cupcake-colored houses, allegorical post-snipe Olympus that's written in liquid by peaceable gods. Still, the purity of Otter's disappearance can't survive the general capturing audits of life. Even Mutt Lange, though mysterious, survives in a fetishized stock photo they always show any time they have to talk about Shania. His Switzerland is like a shallow ocean, and You're Still the One I Love contains a measure of his face as the short, benign plunge from a tree contains Major Tom longing for 0G floating away, outfoxing all habeas corpus. The scene of Otter's death is so smudged for me today by such time as I interpolate the whole of it to mine my callow innocence and blessings for a wormhole in the represented world. Is that what I think of as dreaminess then? Jesse's girl, covetous and urgent, comes on. 800 pounds of marijuana are found off the coast of Orange County in the morning, and I flourish. In their molten convergence of largesse and need, there is a fixture of interludes believed to be respites from history somehow inside me, like a disappearing act. In the meadows festooned with the precious calamities inherent to my class, this one, unassuageable and durative, keeps calling back. Then I blink at the patterns of dust on my copy of Loveless, or flash my eyes over the differential snowflake ontology that orders my belief. That dreaminess makes time seem personal and neat, a flag of one color folded perfectly and buried with its casualty alone in the sea. Then that song goes off, then its friendliness departs. My only desire is to love the music hard and to unlearn its world without drowning. At the edge of this desire, there's a phantom TBD, endless trailers play in faint black and white flickering patterns I can't seem to process in time, to be carried from their distillate figure to where, as if mated to Hal's moving castle, the health center moves on my fortress of solitude, breathing public fire, and melts my isolation chamber down into puddles of contact solution, a rinse conceived to make me more clear-eyed. Because my own sight is of no consequence alone, nearly anything I see is like a Bethlehem to me, giving birth to the most divine eruption, and the advent adapts and its violence is blunted. Every day is like training day, little red school, vibrant blue skies strobe together the cherries and berries of its light effects and sweetened vegetation. But I would wage war on everything I've ever written to produce a form of gratitude surpassing what, permitted to return to, I acquire. Still, I am so thankful for life. Yet this gratitude, brutally partial, unsettles. I want the commons of its radical suggestion, yet only end up with my signature Dubai. Still, I am so thankful for life. It's an odd thing to say, to repeat, because it departs from no site of reception. The math is sound, but the soul takes it on as a joke, like the water on the knee in Hymn to Life. Its raiments are offered up in total supplication, but to whom? The styles go limp on the absence of a frame. They puddle in silk and stiff denim, a pink cotton shirt on which someone's printed YOLO. I wait for the ghost to stand true in these clothes and deliver affirmative hugs. But there won't be commensurate floods of receipt, no circulating joy. And for me, that means there is no absolution. When we lived near Eden Park, I was green. And now I think in saying that I might be even more so. I would drink Folger's espresso near a citronella candle reading Mandelstam, and then I'd go and visit Mirror Lake. Under the glare of the water was a wonderful pattern, curvaceous and made of spring colors. These children had painted one summer as part of a public arts project now defunct. But the horror was the way in which the lake was all for me. Existence seemed the emblem of a hurt, romantic man exteriority had processed and rendered as material no thought might ever eclipse. The wind styled over the surface of the water, freely with easy intensity, enough to cause commotion, although never any panic. The currents were mild, patterns brief from wave to wave. So I never felt obliged to organize them in my mind as more than sated victims of an uncoordinated surging. The sun was just a paper moon, its warmth and effect of its need for some beloved to believe in it and authorize the venue of its beaming. Slow swarms of dandelion spores would migrate north from the river bank and settle on an aimlessness the airflow agreed to. Shamelessly happy, I sailed into a parallel universe. Dreaminess blew into this one's unbearable completeness. As sweet as pain to the saint, as Notley wrote, is the door to the actuality of those events. I am pushing it open with my nose like a cat, and going blind as the dazzle from the surface hits my eyes, I wince and shudder, making vague figures out in a room, overcoming or eluding crude representations through maneuvers which appear to me like dancing to a child, as the movement of the real world in rehearsal. There's a flickering black and white pattern moving over the air, and their forms are bleeding endlessly and freely flowing into it, out of it, streams and sprays untraceable and lost to destination, like the most evasive sentiment seeming to come to a critical truth. My eyes lose the thread of this movement in a moment of being bound into it. Care like distortion through being enforced or bound inside these audits to the forms of certain persons whose abandonment describes the very limits of existence. Then one of them, another svelte and hurt romantic man, emerges from the overwhelming motion to seek the miraculous, alone, in the dreamiest fashion, as then he went down to his ship, which was already poised, tiny argosy of sacrificial love, where the Venus deer he would become found its headlights, the sea, reached via the streets of a city at night. The last thing he would see is light on water. Thanks, y'all.
I'm really undone by the majesty and celestial, devastating music of these writers. I can't get over it. I just can't get over it. Like, I don't understand. I need this to hold me, like, you know, I just don't understand how I'm part of this, but I know that, and I could cry for it, but I know how much of living is the approximation of this sound, this feeling, and I could almost forget that I live for it, except that people make me remember. So, and I'm really in awe of the dignity of this achievement, this book. And I was thinking about it as I was reading through it, because many of, you know, it's an immense book, so it's definitely like your desert island read, or, you know, one stop shop, instant family, instant kin, and there's many scenes in like, as you just kind of page through at random, there's drugs and sex and abyssal moments and strangeness and music, majesty and music, but I would propose, because I've often been called abject. And okay, like, fair enough. But I was just thinking about the Irish poets and the drunken Irish poets, and the fact that this is a sober text. This is a sober anthology, and I'm fascinated by that. Like, I don't know how I found myself reading this I think it was Colm Toy Bean had a piece about about Beckett, and I don't know anything about Beckett, but I Googled, was Beckett a drunk? Because I remembered reading this diss. The only way I had any idea, I mean, obviously Beckett was an Irish poet, so what are the chances that he was a drunk? Sorry, that's prejudice, but that's a stereotype. It's a stereotype, but somehow I remembered having come across Burroughs having said something in an interview. It was like a total dig on Beckett, and Burroughs was like, yeah, Beckett just goes down into the bottle, like I'm going up to the sky, like through the asshole, he had some whatever, and I just thought, okay, Beckett's in the bottle. I just never heard a diss of Beckett. Everyone worshiped Beckett, and then I thought, what if Beckett is just a drunk, and that entire poetics is this kind of wallowing, circular, perseverating pathos. I don't know. But then it's very, very rare to get a wild Irish visionary who is not drunk. I mean, there's a lot of other good things to say about Eileen, but I just think just think about it poetically, just when you buy the book, just as you're paging through it, because there's shitloads of intoxication in the book. It's a book that understands what that means and also understands the countercultural value of such states. I like the laugh. Anyway, I'm here to read a poem. I was overcome with emotion. Thank you for allowing me briefly to pound on the pulpit. They don't let me out very often these days. It's good to be back in New York. So thank you to my president. My name is Ariana Reines. They told us to say our name. And this is called Truth or Consequences. One day a woman took me down to a stream to smoke, then up a hill to a plain where we walked an old road. German tourists were soft in the distance. We reached a city built into cliffs. Beside the sun, an eagle unfurled and stayed, and I stared at it for an hour beside the woman, not knowing her yet, or myself. Another day, she took me to a town called T or C, where pools of water stand along the road. She stood me in warm water there, I in her Speedo, and she in somebody's shorts. The square trough, dark with minerals, was dark with them for us. The sun was up. The people were quiet along the road, giving me the panicking feeling the sight of people patiently having fun always gives me. Then, all of a sudden, I saw jerky. A curtain of jerky spread over the world. I blinked and blinked into it. It was jerky, veined with white fat. No matter where or how I looked, it was the center of all I could see. Why do visions of beef keep on being given to me? Was my way of saying, fine then, Lord of my heart, even though I am not a bovine woman, but rather a chipmunk or rat, a raccoon on a good day. My Lord God said nothing. The jerky continued to spread in my eye. We have to get out of the water, now, I said. My friend, a seer and wise woman, agreed. We got in her car. The sun started to talk to me. I was in such a state of submission. Jerky makes a cross, Ariana, he said, between fire and water, air and earth, as the middle of the animal is both a medium and a center, an X of substances and methods beloved by me. He said that cattle belong to him, and that when they're dead, he loves to touch them with his heat, as he loves to touch all that lives and dies. Inside the cow, it is a place, a cave, red with light, as where men and women lit their early fires to draw pictures of herself. At the center of this place is an invisible X that marks the nothing out of which real things occur. To put this another way, the wooden post at the center of the peristyle may well hold up the ceiling, but really it is the staff of Mercury down which spirits slide like firemen to mount thee. The secret of dried meat is my love for it, said the sun, above and beyond your own. Cattle are pulled by the sun, he explained, who is himself pulled by the cattle of heaven. Thus the human is meant to follow the clatter of cattle over the earth. It is simple, he said, as anyone could know who knows how to read the book before her eyes. The people follow the cattle. The cattle follow me. The dog forsook the wolves to be with thee, which is a mystery of love. At this there was a pause. All water follows the moon, who is a woman, who follows the earth, who is also a woman with fire in her belly, like you, Ariana. I felt it, the fire and the water in me and the salt of my longing, and didn't deny it. Of course you know, he went on, that the wood is beloved of the fire that bends its back in ecstasy, and the air, even when pale and cool, in mild cascades and ionic colonnades of ascending negation, keeps you as best as it can. You and your fire water in mild poses as information panics morosely and jocosely through you are the lodge into which I have put my black stone. And I love you to keep it hot where you are, Ariana, and by your nature, as best as you can. What do I have to do? I said. You don't have to do anything, he said. Why do you always think you have to do something? I don't know, I said, maybe because I'm a girl. That's no excuse, said the sun. Just have fun. Yeah, sure, I said, suddenly feeling envious and macho. I do have fun, I said. Not enough, he said. Fine, I said, I'll have more fun. Have more, he said. Fine, I said, Dad, I'll have more fun. If my tone annoyed him, he didn't show it. I love to touch the cow, the sun said again. I even love to touch her bones. I whiten them in my perfect heat. I sweat the last milk from her dead tit and make a sacred saddle of her skull, which when you take it up is an instrument by which you can know me and love me, if you like to, whenever you want. So you do want me to worship you, I said. Only if you want to, he said, if you ever feel sad or confused. I want you to know, the sun went on, that the earth's back is lonesome and sore for the massage of the hooves of cattle. And when you get money, here's what I want you to do with it. I said, when I get money? I thought I didn't have to do anything. How am I going to get money? You said to have more fun. I know what I said the sun. Have more fun when you get money. But how will I get money, I said. Ariana, he said. Sorry, everybody. You're starting to sound very common. When you get money, treat yourself right and then buy cattle and go in the night to the plains with them and leave them there to go whichever way they want to go, and then get more money and return with more cattle in the night to that place and to other places with accomplices who love you and know my light by you, and combine your money with theirs for increase of purchase, and put the cattle out in the nights where the moon shines my light enough to silver their horns and shimmer their coats again and again as they walk, the muscle and hides on their shoulders and hips, as Johnny Appleseed planted trees. Ariana, I want you to plant cattle for me and for Earth, who is a lonely woman, always complaining in a shrill voice up to me, though I admit with good reason, I hate the way she whines. She yearns desperately to be touched in this way. And in any case, if she does not get what she wants, I will miss you, all of you, never to kiss you again. Do you know what I'm talking about, he said. Yeah, I know what you're talking about, I said. The end of the world, blah, blah, blah. Well, not quite, but it's too complicated to go into, he said. Don't worry, I'll kill all the assholes. I can't tell if you're joking or serious, I said. Ariana, sometimes you pretend to be stupid, he said. I know, I said. I'm sorry. The flesh and the bones of these animals has always been mine, as the milk and the water of these animals was thine for a long time, and of course by their water I mean their sweat and the brine and dew on their eyes. The weight, rhythm, and blood of these hinds is meant for Earth, who, as I said, longs for them and deserves them. I get it, I said. Good, he said. As I write you, my eyes are round as gold coins, the left one still goggling up at the moon, the right one like the bursting belly button on a happy baby, though not happy at all, but glad. My secular life, if I ever had one, is over.
I really am Simone White. I guess I just want to say one thing about the literature aspect of the book, which is that Eileen is really the best reader of poetry I have ever encountered, and that's not like a little bit of flattery or whatever. Like, I have learned how to sort of cut through the bullshit of everything else that's being out there by sort of watching what Eileen finds, and I don't know how they, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed, do this, but it is done. And I'm like so shocked that somehow I have appeared in this thing, in all the sort of array of garbagey literature maybe that's out there. Okay, so I'm gonna read this thing called Stingray. Having had no proper family name, I made do with Stingray. Never loved a man, so-called, for more than a generation, black and white, suffer nameless conditions, instigated by the father's line of nobody, murmurs to the baby, good night, nobody. There is no longer any way to count beneath the highways of the eastern seaboard, above the Mason-Dixon line, underlie so many crossings. What to me the arched wing of a black stingray, who think weeping over her vicious mouth, somnolent practice of stuck terror of the wave, is Stingray the atomic principle of giantism? Make my whole mouth move around the fire, make the fire everywhere or cold. On this street, Stingray, where a man thinking his boat, beauty knowing monies or leather, white leather, feeling, however, the killing power of the great sea monster, her haunch whip, a think, acquired as a gorgeous capital. Wait and sting, why Odysseus always in trouble with the one-eyed? What caused his love of lake demons, her gauze wimple under black-lit stars, his very early anticipation of the right guitar sound, its fullness, no reunion of the ocean and the desert, just reflect on the history of the house. 57 rays die in Chicago. For want of so lush a malapropism, I wait a long time outside the ocean and your body, sometimes nothing of images, dead brown and such, like luminous captivity of the dead, repeated back to our obsessional contemporary, says back a weird lie. When inside me a bit of God comes out your mouth as the command to feel you, what, kind creature, will you take me from being to what? Her mallow glamour warns, warmed in the glowering ripple light, this liquid, this death to you. Lady, come under this death, it is ablaze. In its blue-white perfection, hold your hand like a cup. Waterlight will pour you into the whole day, the deafening memory of your 10th year occurring in the space between sunup and sundown on a plot the size of an hibiscus flower, you miss. The bicentennial was yesterday, right queer and muggy apparently evening. Every minute the declaration must be signed. Firework on the barge child mine, to which no superfund has yet gently repaired. Get me a stingray the color of slate. A little girl's switchblade, the horizon of which is an arc, gutter oil, slick Delaware, that horizon, is New Jersey a plot, her shore, farms send blueberries and war. In this form, it is impossible to be together. It is being nothing at all, then cast in this court trick, vulvar form, oh clamped then, between together and nothing, forms of sand, coarse, pink, edible, no seams along which to break. A black flag waves in hot wind. Form of formless. A craft appears. Materialized hot gas, raucous to suspend life outside of life. Shadows beyond wishing, and male news imploded to hover, no wools or porcelain anywhere in sight of the flat class, Stingray. Vanity's pool, heteronymous in the tight grate. Withdraw from earth one fractal initially. Retreat then. The slick thing quavered, she said, of sediment rustling abashed. Contemplation of stones rushing together under the fresh lake, not the elementary bite of capital. Give, that is a wound. And she, raw, bloodless. Could you bleed, housed, gowned, fucked in a prehistoric manner, still sea monster. The very source or the veil, complete silence, the silent inhalation or stopped time, time being unmet, totally unregulated, slack and unreturned, threshing the DNA then, she becomes another one.
Okay. Great. We have one mic, and you guys have one mic.
Oh, we only have one?
Questions? Any questions? And you can ask any of us any question about anything. We may or may not answer.
I just wanted to ask each of you to define pathetic, or what it means to you in your own way, or if one person wants to define it, or if all of you want to define it. Is it me? Thank you.
I feel like pathos must be involved. That's my contribution.
Thanks, Eddie. The introduction to pathetic literature is a great work of art. I recommend it. But I kind of think you made it kind of heroic. That's what I'll say.
Yeah. I think the introduction is great, but I want to ask Eileen about abject and pathetic, because I was thinking about that in relationship to, the Nightwood, Juna Barnes, and Chester Himes writers I love so much. But, so yeah, I don't know if you want to say more.
I know that abject is, but what do you mean by abject?
Yeah, and you know what, I took out my phone so I could look up abject in relationship to, because you, in the introduction, it was a lot about sadness, strong emotion, pathos, and then abject, a person or behavior completely without pride or dignity, self-abasing.
But abject doesn't contain joy.
Well, it can. I mean, Nightwood. So this is not to change the title of the anthology, but it was just like, it was just a tributary. It was a tributary, yeah.
So why is, I mean, my question is, why is Nightwood abject and not pathetic?
And that's what I was thinking, because I was thinking like, oh, we're actually, it's the same set of, complex feelings and emotion, like it should be bad, but somehow it's good, and that's what I was thinking about in relationship, especially to Himes and Barnes, and that seemed to be the core of like the pathetic spirit as you were defining it in the introduction.
Use the
Like,
mic.
what if that's, I mean, I haven't read Nightwood for like 20 years, but my recollection of it, I like only remember the doctor and his speech about, like, he gives this speech when she's desperate in love, she like goes, right? Like, I don't know, like, should be bad, but it's wonderful. Could that be Sublime? Sublime literature, edited by Eileen Myles. Sorry, that would be like, who would edit that? Harold Bloom. You have something to say?
About being pathetic. I don't. I mean, I as a concept, it's capacious enough to fit many things that the opposite of which are like crushing, or you know what I mean, like that don't, so that the pathos of things comes from like down rather than up. I mean, that's kind of the way I think about the pathetic or emotion or something, which is the stuff from the introduction you were reading tonight. What you read about emotion was like my favorite description. The reading that you did this evening about emotion was my favorite definition of pathetic, I think. That did all the work for me.
I feel like there's also this idea that, you could call it the heroic as the opposite, but it doesn't have to be binary. But there's this place where what these writers are seeking is not available. That's supposed to be kind of the upper echelon, like you were saying, and sometimes you have to go down to find the truth. Sometimes it's not available in the place, we reach to the places that are visible and seem within reach and are easy, and we watch sort of a lot, there's so much repetition in how we absorb information, but there's always this kind of, there's this absence for people. Chip Delaney comes to mind, this idea that to be yourself, you have to go somewhere else where you're not supposed to be, that's not heroic, where the light isn't shining on you, and that's where you find sort of the core of what you're looking for. And so it's necessary to be pathetic because it's a rejection of kind of impossible standards to find something that's actual.
That's nice, Eddie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You didn't want.
I don't have it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I also just felt the word was lying around in this kind of derided state when it felt like it had had a long history, and a rich history. And so so I think probably, abject and pathetic say many of the same things, but pathetic has such a low bad currency, certainly in America. And so that seemed like an opportunity to fill it with something else and talk about something else all at once. So it sort of reminds me of when New York was, I was going to say when New York was cool, but when New York was broke and there was a lot of extra space that could be repurposed in all these ways, and it seemed like that was very pathetic New York, and it's sort of like you've really got to strive to find the pathetic now in New York. I mean, that's not true. It's everywhere. It's just differently distributed. But it felt like it was sort of in a state of excess, I think, at an earlier time, and now it's more like a delicacy, where you would find.
Something to do with degenerate, like in the Hitler sense. like, I mean, I'm probably putting my Jewish feelings all over this. I've been guilty of that before. But, you know, like Hitler had his idea of what he considered degenerate art. There's a lot of pathos in that art. So maybe we're against Hitler. Maybe it's an anti-Nazi book. Okay, sorry. I just had to get that out. I'm sorry. I'm delirious. I have to pee.
Do we have other questions?
Degenerates are the people who wouldn't let him into art school. We have other questions.
Hi, I just wondered if you could maybe talk about the relation of empathetic with pathetic. I thought that might be a productive thing to think about, empathy and pathetic.
Who would you like to direct that to? You. Well, I think empathy, I mean, I have a really very simple, I think empathy is inside pathetic, right? You know, I feel like pathetic holds empathy, you know, but it's sort of like a kind of a funky container in a way, you know, but empathy is in there. I feel like it's so much the point, you know, because it is just that path route that somehow got stomped on all over the place, certainly in America. So I think in a way, I mean, I think a big part of what we're talking about is having empathy for difference and multiplicity, and which again I think is not. I mean, I think the disease of the country we're living in is kind of an absence of that in so many ways. You know, I mean, like the park I loved so much was so destroyed because it was, you know, there was no empathy for all the kind of pathetic practices that were there. There were dailiness and richness and vernacularness, and, you know.
There was also taking a stand. This is still a question for you, but there was the fact that you guys were taking a stand for the East Village Park in an impossible situation, and one that wasn't likely to go your way, but it was so important to do it, and so much feeling was created out of it. You know, again, it's kind of standing at odds with this sort of larger forces who are trying to just sort of constantly impose their will, and there's a certain, like, you have to embrace the position you're in a way. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I mean, and it was so interesting because at some point I met all these different people I had never met before when I was involved with, you know, a group of people trying to save East River Park, and I met a woman who was, you know, a woman, I mean, I always think of people as older and they're my age, but she was this older woman from Brooklyn and who, you know, who had kids, and I said, what do you do? You know, we just wound up in this event together, and I knew this woman, but I had never met her, and so we took the subway together, and I said to her, so what do you do besides this? And she goes, I'm a mom. You know, and I said, well, how did you get involved in this? And she told me there was something she was fighting for in Brooklyn, and, you know, it just became really important to her. And through it, she met all her politicians and all her school board people, and she just became an activist through fighting for something, you know, and that was, you know, that was why she was there. And I said, well, just tell me a really good story. Like, tell me about something that you guys, you know, like, you know, that you really struggled at and that you really had success, and it was really, and she just looked at me and she goes, you never win. And I was like, what? And she goes, no, we just, you know, and I was taken aback, and at the other time, by the same token, I thought it was so beautiful, because I felt that it was exactly the meaning of what we were doing. We were just in this kind of practice, and we were working together, and we all wanted these things. And the point was not whether we would get them, but exactly what Eddie was saying, that there was this energy about going out there and trying to do it and showing that you were trying to do it and exposing yourself to being declared a fool, you know, to fight for something to fight the city that you can't do, you know.
Hi. Holding a microphone sure is something. I was just wondering if, you know, when you were talking about you mentioned that poem you wrote that your friend wrote that we could find in the book of when someone twitched, and you were like, no, that's what I meant when I was talking about pathetic. You know, it's amoebas working. Can you hear me now? Yes?
Yeah, there was a poem?
Yeah, you mentioned when you were talking, there was a poem in the book that we could find. It sort of fit the definition of pathetic because there was a moment where somebody twitched, and you were like, that's what I was getting at. Yeah. I was just wondering, because pathetic has such an intense connotation that you mentioned, or this is not just used for anyone. What was the point where you arrived to this conclusion where, you know, you could say something pathetic or you could write something pathetic and it meant what this book means, you know? Because I feel like when you express something, it can be kind of like, when you hear that something is pathetic, there's a knee-jerk reaction to like, I could have said that better, or I could have been less small. Throughout putting this book together, what was the process of feeling like pathetic was just an amoral thing and it was just something that could be and it was necessary? Like, when did feeling like something that was pathetic stop being negative and start being more like, no, this is exactly what it is and this is exactly what I meant to say in the first place?
Oh, right at the beginning. Okay. Right at the beginning. You know, I mean, I suppose just it was, you know, like I think, you know, I first heard it in relationship to something called, in the art world, called pathetic masculinity. And it was like in the 90s, and there was sort of, it was a way to talk about work by guys like Mike Kelly and Tony Ausler, were just, you know, like in kind of abject, I was going to say sort of abject, kind of personal, diaristic feeling. It was like, but it was the wrong people having feelings, and the wrong, you know what I mean? And it felt like it was feminism for boys, you know, and kind of, you know, it was kind of a high, you know, kind of Tony slackerdom, you know, and it just started conversations among, you know, like myself and some friends of mine who were like feminist art critics who were saying, but it's just feminism done by the wrong people, you know? So suddenly it's kind of great art, you know, and very valuable, you know? And so it just like, in a way, it was sort of like, so right, I mean, that led me to think, well, what is pathetic literature then? And it just kind of caught my eye in terms of what this word means, what it holds. Does it mean it holds the wrong thing or the wrong person? Or is it the set of feelings that are enclosed, you know? And it just started a whole chain of questions and attractions, and then I just moved it over to literature, and then I thought, who belongs, you know? And I think too, I have such a feeling about belonging. In a weird way, I thought, well, what is this book about, or what is this gathering, you know? Except that it's a very kind of odd kind of belonging, you know? It's sort of like, 'cause the things don't fit in any other. I mean, they're every work in this book is really different, radically different. I mean, you could cluster them, but it's really just kind of like, what if you put these things together? So there's something very, you know, I feel like there's something more arbitrary than not in the procedure, you know, and that's the pleasure, you know, and I hope that's the pleasure in the reading, you know, thinking, why this, you know.
Well, first of all, thank you all so much. It's been really, like, lovely and joyous. Oh, I can see everyone all of a sudden. And I wanted to ask about, you were talking about abject versus the pathetic or pathetic, and I wanted to ask also about foolishness in connection to the pathetic. What is the word? Foolishness. Like, in the sense, I was reading this essay that doesn't technically exist yet, but it's going to soon, and it was talking about like foolishness in the sense that it's discussed in revolutionary suicide as like a radical act, and to be foolish in the sense of like politics and in the sense of activity, and to be foolish also in the sense of, I don't know, like earnestness. And yeah, so I wanted to hear you talk a little bit about that, if that's okay. All of you.
All of us.
Yeah, you can send it down the line if you want.
It made me think of Eileen citing Simone Weil, because I don't know this essay that will soon exist, but to me the word fool, I find it odd. Like, I don't know who wrote the essay. I don't know if you're here, but I find it odd to characterize suicide as foolish, because foolishness has an element of comedy and play in it. And I don't mean to be like a school marm or like a dour, like Sunday school teacher, but I do have this wish that people wouldn't commit suicide, even though they have the right to. I don't want to like go too far in that direction, but I just want to like come back to the fool for a moment, because one thing about Simone Weil is she's not funny. Like, but if you read Simone Weil, it's very infecting. It's very, very beautiful, and her theology is so weirdly, so incredibly logical that its beauty is very dangerous, because it sort of has this procedural way of growing on you and in you, but I wouldn't call her foolish, because she is not playful, and she's certainly not laughing. It's like a lacrimal, deeply affecting, dangerous beauty that, I don't know. I guess I get a little nervous when things get semantical. Semantical? Can we have some less semantical questions? Sorry, does somebody else have something smarter? Yes.
I think revolutionary suicide is different, because revolutionary suicide is like a radical divestment from a taxonomy of order and values. And I think that it's often like, so who would divest from the project of whiteness? Who would divest from the project of, being a property owner? So these things are described as foolish, as reckless, as intoxicated, because they're just not legible or reasonable or rational within the prevailing scheme of values. So I think that there's something about pathetic that is also resonant with that, because it's like it is the position that should be crushed, but it is not. And that's what I, feel in the kind of the introduction of Eileen's embrace.
I also just I was listening to Saidiya, and I realized that I was sort of sitting next to the master of this problem. But I guess one of the things I wanted to add is that embarrassment or shame and that register of foolishness is actually not, I don't think, the same either. And rather than the comedic aspects of it, the sort of crush, not goofy, but just really unable to face oneself aspects of pathos or patheticness or foolishness are aspects that I've always been really interested in, but they're totally separate, I think, from what you're describing and the stuff that I'm thinking about when I'm, yeah.
I'm entranced. But it's not about. Can one play at revolutionary suicide? Can one?
Use the mic because nobody can hear you.
Can that be something that?
That was a good question. Can one play at revolutionary suicide?
I guess there's a ludic quality to, kind of stepping out of place, and thus the foolish, the reckless, the intoxicated. So I think that there's a kind of excessive liberatory dimension that can look like play, which is different than a taunt playing at revolution. It's like, oh, revolution, can revolution be play? Can it afford certain pleasures? Can it, yeah.
I was also thinking about, this is something I've been thinking about in general recently. But, you know, if you ever identify yourself as a poet to other people who aren't poets, the first thing you get asked is, how do you make money? You know, it's not a cliche to say you're a poet, but it's a cliche to respond that way to a poet, because it happens so often. And you know, it's happened to me a bunch. And lately, the way I think about it is that capitalist culture is just so embedded in everyone's minds that when you say I do something, you know, out of an attempt to find beauty and understanding, or maybe to find lack of understanding, to find something that's beyond understanding, because understanding has its limits. The first people, when you say that to someone and they don't ever think about that, all they say is money. So, you know, it's like we're trapped in this situation. Something isn't pathetic if it's isolated in a vacuum. It's pathetic in relation to something else. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I was just stating the obvious, but the assumption is if you're a poet, you're a fool. Right. And that you would then elaborate on that for many years. You know. I also, this is just not really, this is not so interesting, but it's just a detail. I remember going to a museum in Iceland, and there were all these pictures of Icelandic people from history, and, you know, Gregorius, a farmer, and somebody, a seamstress, and then it was just John, a fool. You know, it's like, what did he do? What did, you know, it was so amazing to think it could be a trade in itself, you know. Though I suspected it meant something about a degree of intelligence or lack of it, or, you know, something. Oh, a landless fool. That's what it was. A landless fool. So that the two. Yeah. So I guess it really has a piece of relation to capitalism for sure. You know. A landed fool. Yeah.
Hi, can you all hear me okay? Hi. Yes. Okay. Hi. So to follow up on that conversation, I guess I have a question on how each of you might feel of the use of pathetic in rendering someone that was previously unpatheticable. What I mean by that is, earlier Professor Hartman was referencing Chester Himes, who in all his work, like the
in all
narrator
whose
is
work?
always, Chester Himes.
I think I'm being revealed as a person who's not hearing very well.
Sorry, my bad. So in all of Himes's work, there's this, it's like gallows humor, but it's always narrated by like this cop duo who are never pathetic. But like 50 years later, you've got figures like Paul Beatty, who in White Boy Shuffle has a whole plot element about ritual suicide, which is both pathetic and humorous, but it's specifically to render systems of power pathetic. And it seems like it's particular to each artist. So I'm kind of curious how each of you, you've consecrated bodies or voices as pathetic that matter to you, but is there this negative capability to render what's ugly as pathetic as a means of restoring its value? Does that?
Could somebody explain that question to me?
I'm sorry. I'm struggling a little bit to conjure answers. I don't know about the restorative power of the pathetic. That's what I've got.
I think we may need a slight simplification of that question to help us answer the question, because we're questioning the question, which could be
I'm-
an embodiment of pathetic grandeur.
Yeah, sorry. I've been up since 5 a.m. I apologize. So, in each of your work, you consecrate a voice or body in a way that it was previously unrecognized. This is the pathetic that's in the introduction. Sorry. What I'm curious about is there a way to use pathetic as a way to render someone who refuses pathetic as a value, whether it be through a system of power or capital? Is the act of pathetic the same as rendering something as camp? Does it make something both accessible or powerless?
All my life, since I was 10, I've been waiting to be in this hell here with you. All I ever wanted and still do.
And I have some thoughts, but maybe I can speak with the person who asked the question later. Yeah.
I think we're done here then. Thank you so much for listening to us tonight.